there's a good argument that Rome never really did collapse. It kind of
Yep.
faded, and it
Yep.
always had like, rumps here, arm there. There was always like a piece of Rome floating somewhere, but it didn't really. It wasn't like it's 1402 route. There was nothing like
Yep.
that, right? So,
No.
what's your thought
And
on
I
that?
mean, we'll start with a fascinating piece of trivia, which is, when did the last monarch who claimed to be the Roman emperor, when did the last monarch cease to reign who claimed to be the Roman emperor? The answer is 1946, folks. It's very much in the present day. And that just goes to show that, as you said, that there's many, many different people who could have claimed it over time.
All right, welcome back to another episode of Cutting Through with me and my co-host Mike Gatto. Mike, good to see you back.
Great to be here.
Um, you're gonna have to give me some room here, because I read an article this week talking about how much men think about Rome.
So how often do you think about the Roman Empire,
How much
David?
do
Why don't we start there?
Yeah, I think about the well. See, it's a little hard because as you know, I'm a big adherent of the philosophy of Stoicism.
Sure.
And, one of the leading lights of that, of course, is Marcus Aurelius,
Yep.
whose diary is
Seneca.
the
Yeah.
Meditations. So, he was a Roman emperor. So Rome is like often, top of mind with me. But in other ways, how often do I think of Rome when it comes to, what are we doing these days? This is just like blah. Probably a couple times a day.
Yeah.
Is that
That's what I was
weird?
gonna say. Twice a day, guaranteed.
Yeah, a
Guaranteed.
couple times a day. I
Guaranteed.
do.
And remember, this is a lot of diverse viewpoints.
Mhm.
Part of it is thinking like, oh my gosh, what stage in the collapse are we? Which I think will
Mhm.
be the subject of another podcast. And another one is, gee, is this total idiots on the political stage comparable to Heliogabalus or one of the more ridiculous emperors? And then part of it is also just thinking about like a certain battle tactic or something neat that happened, and it crossing along your mind in the course of a day. I'd guarantee at least twice a day for me.
Yeah, at least twice a day. But of course, women apparently, to the study or the article that I read, they don't think about Rome as much, right?
Yeah.
I mean, is that true, or?
I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of people like Mary Beard, noted Roman historian. I mean,
Yeah,
he
good
probably
point.
thinks about it many, many times a
Good
day.
point.
So.
Well, but by the way, let me also say this: the article that I read, I thought was really off base, because it tried to make it a privileged white position to think about Rome, and that it was some sort of like neoconservative way. Dude, no, I'm a freaking Mexican, man. And I'm fascinated with Rome.
Yeah.
I am. So please
Although
get
I
the
will note,
politics out of it.
You have a Roman derivative last name, which of course,
Quintana, 5,
yeah,
right?
names like that were so common in
Yeah.
Roman times, and Spanish-speaking countries, Italian-speaking countries still have names like
I should call it Quintilis. That would be
or just Quintus, right?
yeah, right.
Yeah.
5 is something. So anyway, so you know more about Rome than anyone else that I know. So what I have been always wanting to ask you about since I read the article was, one, did Rome actually collapse? Because I think there's a good argument that Rome never really did collapse. It kind of
Yep.
faded, and it
Yep.
always had like, rumps here, arm there. There was always like a piece of Rome floating somewhere, but it didn't really. It wasn't like it's 1402 route. There was nothing like
Yep.
that, right? So,
No.
what's your thought
And
on
I
that?
mean, we'll start with a fascinating piece of trivia, which is, when did the last monarch who claimed to be the Roman emperor, when did the last monarch cease to reign who claimed to be the Roman emperor? The answer is 1946, folks. It's very much in the present day. And that just goes to show that, as you said, that there's many, many different people who could have claimed it over time. There's people today who could claim it. And I think that's also a valid concept for people to start with, which is, Rome never collapsed. It really did just fade away. The example that I give people, and you also note that the idea of Rome collapsing is by definition something that is only powered by hindsight. And what do I mean by that? Well, everybody's familiar with how the Nazis occupied Paris and France during World War II, right? And if you go to that moment in time, 1940, when they invaded France, they took it over, and now it's run by the Nazis, right? You have a foreign power in the capital. And you would go to a French person and say, what is your ethnicity? He would say, I am French. Well, what is your country? It is France. Has France ceased to exist? No, we are just occupied. And he would be right. He would be absolutely right. And France obviously came back, right? It now exists again, right? But that's really what happened with Rome. There were successive waves of different people and cultures who came through. But at what point did people stop thinking of themselves as Roman and stop thinking of themselves as the Roman Empire, if they were or emperor, if they were the ruler? Surprisingly late in time. And there's people today who could claim to be the emperor.
Well, first, before we get to that, because you have put together a list at my request of 9 people who are the most likely could claim, right, the Roman Empire or the Roman throne. Who was the last one in 1942 that you referenced?
1946. The guy is still alive, by the way, and that is Simeon Saxe-Coburg and Gotha. He was the last Tsar of Bulgaria, and you'd be surprised. I mean, that's
the British Empire, though.
No, it's same family. He is the same family as Queen Victoria, as Queen Elizabeth II.
Yeah,
but he was the ruler of Bulgaria. And by the way, we should start with this concept. This is something, unless you think of the Roman Empire a lot, I'd be surprised how many people don't know this. The word Kaiser, the word Tsar, these just mean Caesar. They're just a literal translation of Caesar. And so, whenever you had somebody calling themselves a Tsar, they were essentially saying, I am the spiritual descendant of Caesar.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, I did know that. But no, I think you're right. I think most people don't know that. So let's get to today. And you have a list of 9 people. How did you? What are the parameters for these 9?
Well, of course, I mean, you have to. I guess the best place to start is what is the Roman Empire and what?
Yeah, what would they get? What would they get?
Okay, so look, I mean, this is what historians generally accept to be what an empire was, or emperor was. So first of all, you had to rule at some point the entire extent of the empire as it existed when you were reigning, right? You had to be, and that's internal legitimacy. You also had to have, legal legitimacy internally. You had to have been named as an heir or a co-emperor by your predecessor, and you had to be accepted by some type of legal authority. That could be the Senate, it could be the patriarch in Christian times. And then you had to have international recognition, right? I mean, it's no good if some country somewhere says, hey, we're the blah, blah, blah. Somebody else there in the world of diplomacy had to recognize you as Roman. It's also important, I think, to have held Rome, although later emperors argued that Constantinople was good enough. And finally, you had to be culturally Roman. And that was things like you had to use the terminology. You had to call yourself Imperator Romano, right? You had to call yourself an autocrator, a basileus, something that implied emperor, not just king. You linguistically had to continue the traditions. You had to speak Latin. You had to build monuments that indicated you were a Roman Empire. The military had to be Roman, and you probably should have looked the part. That's what it means to be culturally Roman. So by those definitions, right, the last Roman emperor of antiquity, it wasn't in 476 AD when most people think so. It was actually in 610 AD. A fellow by the name of Phocas. And it's hard to distract him, but it's hard, bad pun. But he was the last Roman emperor of antiquity. He checked all the boxes. Fascinating things happened during his reign. First of all, it was a tradition that every emperor built a monument in Rome. He was the last emperor to build a monument in Rome. He was the last emperor to speak Latin. After that, they all spoke a different language, right? He was the last emperor to speak Latin and to use Latin as the language of the court. During his reign, or shortly thereafter, there was a Roman legion that was founded by Augustus. It was like the 82nd Airborne or the 101st Airborne. It was their most elite legion. It was founded by Augustus. It fought at the Battle of Actium against Antony and Cleopatra. It still existed until his reign. After his reign, it was disbanded. Okay. So you have all of these things shifting. And more significantly, there was all these other changes culturally in terms of how Roman emperors looked. And so when I look at things, I say he was the last emperor of antiquity. But that's not our task today. Our task is to determine who could claim the throne today.
All right. And what do they get if they get the throne? There's really not much, right?
There's nothing that they get
Pat on the
except
back.
yeah.
Good for
Although
you.
I will say that in for thousands of years, this meant a great deal to
Yeah, yeah,
monarchs.
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, hey, don't get me wrong. I would love it if I was the winner. I would think that would be pretty great. So I wasn't
Yeah.
trying to put it down at all. Okay, let's go from 9 to 1. These are your folks that can
Okay, so
claim the throne.
people are going to be shocked about this, but believe it or not,
King Charles.
the no,
Oh, really?
the monarchs of Russia
Okay.
claim to be the heir of the Roman Empire. They call themselves the Third Rome. The royal house calls themselves the Romanovs of Rome. And what is their connection to the Roman Empire? Well, it's actually kind of laughable. You had back in the day, you had some members of the House of Romanov, some Russian kings who married some obscure Byzantine princesses as the empire was crumbling. They weren't even in line to get the throne. But then you also had Russia claiming to be the keeper of the Orthodox faith. And in their mind, the papacy was corrupt and Eastern Orthodoxy was the way to go. And so you had this idea that they had an empire, that they were blessed by the patriarch, and on top of that, that they had married into the Byzantine, the Eastern Roman crown, and so that therefore the Romanov family is the heir to the Roman Empire. I think it's laughable. That's why we rank them the lowest.
But aren't the Romanovs all dead after 1917? Or
No, there are still Romanovs alive to
oh,
this day. They are cousins of the family. There's actually one of them who lives in the San Fernando Valley here in Los Angeles. And,
really?
yes, yes,
Dude, that's
and
perfect.
she's asked that I prostrate myself as someone of Roman heritage, but I thus far have refused.
Oh my God, the Roman Emperor is working at a freaking Kroger's at Chatsworth. I love it.
I don't think that's quite that bad, but yeah,
Okay.
she does live here in the San
Okay.
Fernando.
That's good.
Yeah,
I like it.
yeah. So the next on the list, we'll call this the number 8 on the
Okay.
list would be the House of Savoy, and
Okay.
of course I'm biased because I happen to be close friends with members of the House of Savoy. This is the royal house that ruled southeastern France and Switzerland and northwestern Italy for years and years, and then became the royal house of the reunited Italy. And they still are the heirs to the Italian throne. At some point, their domains were deemed an empire. They called themselves empire. They obviously held Rome, and they were blessed by the papacy. And so if the Romanovs in Russia can claim to be the third Rome, then you've got to put the House of Savoy on your list because they were actually more Roman, of course, than the people in Russia.
And they're still around, right? I mean, you know them.
Still
Yeah.
around. The current heir to the throne, Prince Emanuele Filiberto, is a friend of mine. He's a terrific guy. He's very forward thinking, and he just got headlines because he named his daughter as the heir apparent, which is something that for 2,000 years has not been the case, that women could inherit the throne.
Hold it. So he still goes through the pomp and circumstance of the position.
He does as heir to the throne of Italy.
Mm-hmm.
You have to understand that there's a lot of things that there are powers vested in him by other countries. For
Mm-hmm.
example, the papacy gave them the power to bestow certain knighthoods, certain Catholic Italian knighthoods
Okay.
for time immemorial, and so they still have traditions and
Okay.
things and like that intimately tied. And by the way, his family too also married into the Byzantine emperor families twice, 3 times. So
Okay.
they've got as good of a claim as the Russians, or
Sure.
better, for
Okay.
sure.
I like that one. He doesn't live in San Fernando.
No, he splits his time between Monaco, Paris, Rome, Pacific Palisades. Yeah.
Thank you. No,
Yes.
I like that one. That's a good one. Okay.
All right. Next, this is this would be number 7 on our list. Is that person we mentioned at the beginning of the broadcast, and that is the House of Saxe, Coburg, and Gotha.
Yeah.
And as you noted, right, that is
Mhm.
also the same house as Elizabeth II
Correct.
in Great Britain.
They changed it to Windsor during World
Yes,
War
they did.
One because
Yes,
of the
they did.
anti-German, fervor.
Sentiment. Yeah. So this guy is also what a fascinating individual. He was king. He is the last person alive who was a recognized head of state with diplomatic ties with all the countries during World War II. This guy was crowned Tsar of the Bulgarians in the 1940s as a very, very young boy. I think he was a boy king. But, he was recognized by everybody internationally as Tsar of the Bulgarians until 1946. So there's a guy is still alive today who had, an embassy in Nazi Germany and an embassy with FDR, which is hard to imagine. But what makes him even more fascinating is that this guy came back to Bulgaria in the year 2000 something, ran for prime minister and won. And so he was simultaneously he was king during World War II and served as prime minister. And so this guy, in theory, liaised with Mussolini and FDR and Truman, but also with like Tony Blair, people like that.
Dude,
I mean, just fascinating
he's
guy.
still
Simeon
alive?
III, still alive.
Does he hold
Simeon
office?
III, or the second? No, he doesn't hold office anymore. But the Bulgarian claim, how did the Bulgarians claim to be the Roman Empire? Well, at some point, way, way early in history, like 800 AD, Bulgaria was a very powerful state. It started taking over parts of the old Byzantine Empire. And at some point, the Roman Emperor at the time, recognized the king of Bulgaria as an emperor, said, you two are an emperor by treaty, you two are a Caesar, and I'm going to let you take the title Emperor of the Bulgarians and the Romans. That third sentence. Now, of course, he was just referring to Roman subjects who lived in Bulgarian lands that they had taken over.
But they ran with
it. They clinged to it. They ran with it, and they called themselves Caesar until 1946.
Oh my God, that's a good one. I like that. That's a good story about that guy too. Hopefully we can find a picture of him here.
Yep. So number 6 on the list, and that is the current king of Spain. And of all the people on the list, he has the dignity of being the only still reigning monarch. So, if autocracy is one of the criteria, then this guy's got the best claim. So this is King Felipe the Sixth. He is the current head of the House of Bourbon-Anjou, the Spanish branch. And his claim to the throne is fascinating. And that is that, and we're going to get to this when we get to the next one, but the last theoretical claimant to the Byzantine throne gave away or sold his title a number of times, but he actually left it in his will to the monarchs of Spain. And so the current Spanish monarch, does currently have that title. They've never claimed it, though. They've never claimed it. And some of his ancestors actually affirmatively gave it away. So that's why the current king of Spain, King Felipe, is only ranked number 6.
Yeah, he's ranking pretty low. What's funny is that if this were 1512, they would be going to war over that.
Yes,
they would. They'd be going to war.
That did happen. That really did happen.
Yes. All right. Number 4.
So here are claims 3, 4, and 5 all combined.
What?
That is whoever is the current head of the monarchy of France, right? And that is when the last claimant to the Byzantine throne was alive. He was a guy by the name of Andreas Paleologus, and he was the nephew of the last ruling Roman emperor of the East, the last Byzantine emperor. And he said, well, now that all of my uncles are dead, I hold the title. After the Muslims captured Constantinople, he said, I hold the title. And his claim was recognized by many in Christendom because they all wanted to get that territory back, right? This was the era of holy wars and tension between the faiths and everything like that. So he came to Western Europe and he lived in Rome for a while and he needed to raise money. So first he sold his title to the King of France. And he said, I need money. I want you to go on another crusade. If you promise to give me, 1,000,000 ducats or florins, plus go on a crusade against the Muslims who took Constantinople, you will have the title of Roman Emperor. So he sold it to the King of France. The problem is right now there are 3 claimants to be King of France, right?
Okay.
The best claim is the House of Bonaparte. These are the descendants of Napoleon. They're actually bolstered by the fact that Napoleon himself claimed to be Roman Emperor. He actually looked like it. Right. He took Rome. I mean, he had a great claim to be the last Roman emperor. So the House of Bonaparte, and there's a guy in Harvard Business School named, I want to say Jean Bonaparte, who's like a young dude who theoretically is the Roman Empire, and he's going to Harvard Business School. The House of Orleans also claims to be the current French monarch. And here's what's fascinating. The House of Bourbon-Anjou, which is the same house that rules Spain, has a French line that also claims to have the French thing. And the fascinating thing is that there was another Roman emperor who willed his title to that line. So this guy, in theory, has two, Roman Empire titles by will. What did you get in any wills you ever got? I mean, I got like a $1.50.
Never an empire.
Yep. So number two, and this would be, this would be the question of who is the current Byzantine emperor today, who holds that title. And that's not that hard of a question to answer. And that would be a fellow named Harun Osman Osmanoglu.
Turkish.
Who is yes, Turkish. He is the current heir of the House of Osman, known in Western society as Ottoman, and the current heir to the Ottoman Emperor. So defunct, but they still claim it.
I like that one.
Yeah, and they were very adamant. They were very adamant when they took over Constantinople. They said they started to call themselves Kaiser-i Rum, which means the Caesar of Rome. And they never gave up on their claim that they should capture all of Rome, right? That even Rome and Italy belonged to them because they were the rightful heirs. And their point too was that, wait a second, Roman was pagan for a long time. They had the pantheon of gods. And then they switched to sun worship. They had Sol Invictus. And then they switched to Christianity. What are you saying a Muslim can't be emperor? We're just switching the religion again. We hold Constantinople. We believe in this concept of the Roman Empire. And so we are going to be the heirs of the Roman throne. However, there's some problems with that. And this we'll tell the story fully when we talk about the number one claimant to who would be the Roman emperor today. And that is the current head of the House of Habsburg.
The Habsburgs. You know what? All roads lead to the Habsburgs. Chins. Yes.
And by the way, you told me one of the funniest jokes that only a history geek would get. And that would be, to give like a British insult to somebody, sort of one of those things that takes people a minute. And that would be like, you see someone at the gym and say, you got a really unique jaw, pretty strong jaw, like a Habsburg jaw.
No one would get that.
Right. Which, of course, for those of you who don't know, that implies that somebody's inbred.
Yes. Right.
That they're
right.
kind of deformed. But anyway,
good pictures out there.
The fascinating thing is that, the concept of the Roman emperor never died in the West. They sort of kind of acknowledged the Eastern emperor for a while, but then at some point in the year 800 AD, the Eastern Empire was inherited by a woman. The Roman constitution at the time said that you could not allow a woman to inherit. And so they said that the throne is vacant. And then you had Charlemagne coming together, and he pieced together the old Roman Empire pretty much with a few exceptions. And he actually held the city of Rome. And the Pope at some point said, you know what, the throne is vacant. This guy's reconstituted the empire. And he crowned him Roman emperor in Rome on Christmas 800 AD. And since then, there has been this concept of the Holy Roman Emperor. Voltaire's famous saying, right?
It wasn't holy, wasn't Roman, nor was it an empire. Yeah.
Right. But over time, there were a lot of people who claimed it. You were going to ask me something. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, because I was going to ask you, because we've talked about everybody but Charlemagne, right?
Yes.
And I was going to ask, where did Charlemagne work into this? But I guess his line is coming in at number one.
He is number one. So the most fascinating thing is there was a fellow by the name of Charles V. Of course, most people recognize him because he was this powerful figure during the 1500s. He actually held several thrones at the time, but more significantly, he recaptured Rome. He called himself Roman Emperor. And this is something that, we talked about this at the beginning. It shows the power of this title. This is 1527. This is 1500 years after Caesar and Augustus and after the whole concept was founded. And he and the Ottoman Sultan went back and forth and fought wars over who could have the title of Roman Emperor. They fought wars. They signed treaties. They sent diplomats to negotiate this. It was considered an insult if one of them met each other, at some negotiation and didn't address the other one as emperor. But what finally happened? Very simple. There was a war in the 1500s where the Ottomans forced Charles V to say, you're the emperor. But then a few years later, there was a war in the early part of the 1600s where the Holy Roman Emperor forced the Ottomans to say, no, you are the Roman Emperor. Last one standing, folks. It's Rudolph II, Charles V. They held Rome. They had an empire. It was sanctioned by everybody, including the old Eastern Emperor. And so their heirs by male primogeniture today, House of Habsburg, Karl von Habsburg, he is the Roman Emperor.
Have you read anything about the current head of the Habsburgs?
I believe I have, unless I'm not mistaken. He also is the heir to the throne of Bavaria and also to the Stuart line of succession in England.
Oh,
Do I have that
really?
right? Something like
I didn't
that.
know about the Stuarts.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
that's
he's
interesting.
unless I'm confusing him with another Bavarian
Mhm.
Austrian monarch, former monarch. I think he's also the descendant of Bonnie Prince Charlie.
Oh, okay. Well, this is so fascinating because it makes sense because Charlemagne, right? It makes sense because the Charlemagne, the Habsburgs, they kept that Kaiser, right?
Yeah,
Czar. They're the ones that kept that whole thing going, right? The
for sure.
Kaiser, Germany, Charlemagne. I mean, the Habsburg. That I really think you arrived on the right number one. That honestly, that makes sense
This
to
is a
me.
legal question. There's an answer to it.
Yeah, the Habsburgs for sure.
Yeah,
Because of Charlemagne, man. I mean, he was the Holy Roman Empire, like it or not, regardless of what Voltaire said.
that's right.
He was an emperor. So that was fascinating, Mike. I really love that. That was good. I'd like to get more into the Habsburgs. We should do an episode on the Habsburgs. If you'd like to hear that, let us know. For those of you who are into history as much as we are, but I would like to talk more about the Habsburgs and their influence on much of modern history and their influence on the wars in which we've had, even up to today. Right? They are a very very power behind the power. If you like talking about power behind the power, you want to know about the Habsburgs.
And a favorite of conspiracy theorists, we'll close on one note. They have a motto, and every royal house has a motto, and mottos are almost always in Latin. They're on their coat of arms. There's famous mottos. You can look up the motto of the House of Windsor in England. The Habsburg motto is AEIOU, and they have not revealed to this day what it stands for. There's many speculations. One of the most fascinating ones, of course, and this is in German, but in German it would stand for all of the earth is underneath Austria, which is fascinating, right? And but there's all sorts of conspiracy theories about it. But that's their motto, AEIOU, and they are not telling what it stands
Oh,
for.
I want to do that episode. I love that. Mike, thank you for such an amazing. You did some great research on this, and this was a really good episode. I really appreciate it. If you disagree with anything Mike said, if you think you are the rightful heir to the Roman Empire, let us know in
We
the
want to hear from
comments.
you.
Yeah, we really love bonus points if you're in the San Fernando Valley.
Yes, Henrietta in Chatsworth, we're talking to you.
Chatsworth. Chatsworth is my go-to town. Thanks, Mike, and thank you all of you for watching. Appreciate it. We'll see you next time. Hey, if you like what you hear, like and subscribe. It really means a lot, and we would love to have you coming back every week. Thank you.